On today's show, the Hawks fall short in Portland as a result of a disastrous third quarter, and I don't use that term lightly, plus all kinds of turnover issues in this one. They did have a valiant comeback down the stretch, but it was not enough, and now the Hawks now fall to 6-8 on the season. We'll get into all of how it transpired, what went wrong, and by the way, a lot went wrong in this game, and much more, and all of that is coming up.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1848 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on a Sunday evening into Monday here in mid-November. And today's podcast is brought to you by the folks at FanDuel Sportsbook. If you are beginning the season right now, you can do so with a big return at FanDuel Sportsbook. If you're a new customer, win a $5 bet or more. Get started with $150 in bonus bets. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. I also want to encourage you, as I always do at the top of the podcast, to make us your first listen each and every day here at Locked On Hawks. Please check us out and subscribe to the show anywhere you find your podcasts. That includes places like Apple and Spotify and Overcast, etc. On the audio side, we are also on YouTube on the video side. Please like this video as you're watching it, and crucially, share this podcast with all of your friends. And the Hawks had a chance tonight to get to 500 on the season in Game 14, and it was the first game of a lengthy 2-time zone 4-game road trip for Atlanta. But ultimately, it did not happen, and they fell to 6-8 on the season. It actually started this game pretty well. They led this game by 16 points in the first quarter. That did not keep that pace up the entire game, though. They were up by 8 at halftime, but still up by 10 points mid-third quarter. And then they allowed a 25-2, yes, I'm saying that correctly, 25-2 run to the Blazers in the third quarter. All told, it was a 38-17 third quarter in favor of Portland. That gave the Hawks a pretty big hole to dig out of at the end of the game. They actually were able to do it. They were resilient from that point forward, dug out of it, and won the fourth quarter by 9 points. But in the end, Shaedon Sharpe hits a pretty tough, I would say incredibly tough three at the end. That was the difference in the game. At the very end of this one, the Hawks did not execute flawlessly by any means. They had a chance to tie it or win it at the end. Did not even get a shot up at that point in time. But to be very, very clear, the problem in this game was the third quarter, and particularly a 7-minute stretch in the third quarter in which the Hawks played their worst stretch of the entire season at a very bad time when they had the lead. And truly, again, 25-2 at one point in that stretch, like, just cannot be emphasized enough. That's where they lost this game. I know that everyone wants to focus on the fourth quarter, and we'll do that later on, I promise you. But in the end, the real swing in this game was 7 minutes in the third quarter, in which the Hawks were absolutely destroyed, and all of the turnovers manifested in this game as well. That was probably the biggest big picture story in this one, was the turnovers. But yeah, the Hawks were favored to win this game. And look, you're supposed to win this one. The Hawks were favored by only 4 points. I think they were probably overstated by fans and people I saw on social media about how this is a game that they had to win, quote unquote, unquote. I get all that. But I will also say this is a game that you need to win because you're in control. You're up solidly at times in this one. And, you have a tough game coming up, by the way, a back-to-back on Monday in Sacramento, a much more difficult game on paper than tonight was. Then you go to Golden State from there. That's a more difficult game than tonight. So, not every game is created equal. We've seen that for this Hawks team this year has shown that in spades. They've lost to the Wizards twice. They lost a game to the Bulls that they probably should have won. Then they beat the Celtics in a game they were underdogs by 16 points in. So, it's been a roller coaster all year long. And tonight, within one game, it was a roller coaster. And really, it was a winnable game and one that you probably just need to win most of the time over 82 games. And they should not win this one in this spot. So as far as the analysis is concerned, what we do on the show was kind of dive into what I saw on the stat sheet, what I saw with my eyes, analysis, etc. And then we'll kind of get into how this game unfolded in the middle of the show. And at the end, we'll talk about the players who actually participated and kind of note what they did well or did not do so well in this game. But look, the defense was better than the offense by a lot for Atlanta in this game. But I do think that we'll have to start with the offense because that was the problem pretty clearly in this loss. They had about a 110 offensive rating, which is not absolutely awful, but was not good. And look, I teased it already, but turnovers and ball security was the biggest story and the biggest issue overall in this game. Again, that 7-minute stretch in the third quarter was everything going wrong at the same time. But big picture, over 48 minutes, they just could not take care of the basketball. And that was an issue for obvious reasons. They had 24 turnovers in the first 3 quarters of this game. Now, that would have been a season high for the team for a full game, and they had that many in 3 quarters. In the fourth, it was better. They only had 3 in the fourth quarter, but you still had 27 turnovers in a 48-minute basketball game, leading directly to 32 points for Portland. The previous season high was 20 for a game, and again, they had 24 in 3 quarters. and you just can't excuse that. Look, one of the stories that I saw being discussed a lot, and with good reason, was that Portland decided to kind of use a version of the Miami Heat game plan against Trae Young. They blitzed him the entire game. But ultimately, that's not really what changed the game and really kind of hurt the Hawks. You could certainly argue, and I probably would, that guys were not in their most comfortable positions. Maybe that's part of this. But a lot of that was in the first half when the Hawks were winning the game. And Quinn Snyder got a question about that from Lauren Williams post-game, and that was a good question by Lauren. And Quinn praised Trae for how he handled it. And I think he rightly, after watching the film, talked about the Hawks handled that aspect kind of well at times in this game. It wasn't perfect, but it wasn't that was not the reason why the Hawks had all these turnovers or that the Hawks obviously didn't run. Like, Trae had numbers. Trae played pretty well at times in this game. So it wasn't like it was a disaster on that end only. It was everything else. And look, Trae had 6 turnovers in this game. That is more than you would want and more than he averages in a game. But that's not a crazy number for a lead primary ball handler. Like, he's probably going to average 4 a game. So 6 in a game for Trae Young is not out of the ordinary. The bigger issue is that the number 2 and number 3 ball handlers for the Hawks in this game, Jalen Johnson and Dyson Daniels, combined for 13 turnovers. That can't happen. Those 2 guys cannot turn the ball over 13 times in a game. And that was not, look, I'm not trying to single them out. It was all kinds of guys. Almost everyone had a turnover for the Hawks in this game. It was not just 3 guys. But Jalen was 7 was probably a much bigger issue, I would say, than Trae having 6, for example. And then Dyson finally had kind of an off game on offense in this one after a couple of really good ones. And he can't turn the ball over 6 times either. So notably, and I'll just give the Hawks a tiny bit of grace here. This does not excuse it. I will say that right now. Portland, if you're looking at, and I wrote this on my Patreon, by the way, on Saturday night, Portland's number 1 strength as a team this season, and probably on paper, is their turnover creation defensively, their havoc creation. They're top 5 in the league in that area. They're long, they're athletic, and they're aggressive defensively. They actually make mistakes a lot defensively as well, but they do kind of prioritize, it seems like, havoc creation. But that does not, again, explain 27 turnovers and 24 of them in a 36-minute span. So that's part of this. I can almost stop talking right now. Honestly, that is mostly the game itself. I've given you the big picture on the turnovers. I've given you the small picture of that 7-minute run in the third quarter. I can stop now. I'm not going to, but the Hawks did run well offensively when they had chances to run in this game. They shot the ball pretty well inside the arc. They made the free throws. They were not very good from 3. They were 11 of 32, but that's not even awful. That's 34%. Like, that's a pretty reasonable number. You probably have to make more than that if you're going to turn the ball over all the time. Like, the Hawks turn the ball over on 27% of their possessions. If you're going to do that, number 1, you're probably going to lose. But number 2, if you're going to withstand that, you probably have to shoot the ball better than the Hawks did. But they weren't awful as a shooting team in this game. And there were some bright spots offensively in this one. They had 30 assists. The offense in the fourth quarter was really good for like the first 9 minutes. They had 3 quarters in this game where they scored at a high level. And then there was the third quarter. So big picture, it wasn't good enough. But the ball security was the only thing on offense that was like a true disaster. But it really was. It was to that level where rarely in the NBA can you be so bad in exactly one area and have it light your team on fire. And that happened in this game for the Hawks and ball security. Defensively, they were pretty good all night long. Like, people won't want to hear that, and I totally get that. They played pretty good defensively other than the third quarter. And even then, that was mostly the offense collapsing and allowing runouts to the Blazers in this game. But they held the Blazers to 20 points in the fourth quarter. They had a 111 defensive rating for the game. That's very solid. A 91 offensive rating allowed in the half court, which is excellent. And again, even better when you consider that the Hawks had, one more time, 27 turnovers, but also 16 of them, which is a comical amount, were live ball steals by Portland. And the percentage of, I would say the efficiency of the offense when you get a run out and a live ball steal is so much higher. And the Hawks were, Quinn Snyder always complains about this when you take the ball out of the rim. If you're allowing defensive buckets, it's harder for your offense, and vice versa. It all feeds on each other. And the Hawks were so bad on offense protecting the ball that it led to bad spots for their defense, and they still were able to hold up defensively for the most part in this game. Portland did win the three-point battle in this one, including the big shot at the end by Sharp, but they only made 14 threes. That's a manageable figure. They did not shoot the crazy bleep out of the ball in this game, basically. Hawks also forced 20 turnovers. They had 10 steals. They had 7 blocks. Those are all really good numbers. It's really hard to lose the turnover battle when you force 20 turnovers. And the Hawks did that by 7. They did a lot well. The only thing that they did not do well defensively in this game was rebound. They allowed 27 second chance points, a couple of really, really big missed defensive rebounds in the final 5 minutes with Capella off the floor, and that's always been a problem for the Hawks. it was not only on a Kongwu, but there was one at the very end of this game where Dyson had a pretty clear run at a rebound that he had to get. It bounced twice on the rim. He mistimed it. It led to a second chance point for Portland, et cetera, et cetera. So what I would say, big picture one more time before we move on to the next thing, is that the defense in a vacuum was quite good. And even when you account for the situation, was pretty solid in this game. Overall efficiency-wise, everything other than the glass was really strong, the defense in this game. It was the offense, it was the ball security, and that even fed to the defense. And, if not for a couple of pretty impressive individual performances, they were able to kind of salvage the efficiency offensively despite all the craziness and the turnovers. But the bench was rough for Atlanta in this game, et cetera, et cetera. We'll get into it more later on in this game. But, it was a tough one for Atlanta. I'm not going to be the guy, if you're a new listener, that's going to come on and burn it down unless I actually feel that way, and I rarely do feel that way. But it's not a good result. The Hawks got to win games like this. They've lost too many like this. And while I'm a big proponent in the efficiency, basically, of the point spread as a good indicator of what's supposed to happen or what's indicated to happen or projected to happen, the Hawks were a small favorite, but they were a favorite, and they were up double digits in this game. And when you do that and you lose, I get it. People are not going to take that kindly. And look, maybe you come back and you win on Monday in Sacramento in a game you're going to be an underdog in. That balances out. Obviously, the Boston win is worth, quote unquote, the same amount as a win against anybody. Sometimes, it comes in odd places, but 12 minutes into the podcast, I'll just say this: it's not a good loss for the Hawks. It's just not. And the turnovers are just such a glaring disaster that it's not even that hard of an analysis to make. There's nuance, of course, and I'll always give you that on the podcast on my context and what actually happened. And yes, hats to the Blazers, who played very well defensively in this game, but you can't do that. And that's where I'll leave it there at the top of the show. All right, more to come in a second when it comes to how this game unfolded, and it was frustrating at times and also encouraging at times, etc. Before that, though, a word from our partners on today's show. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. It's sometimes hard to remind ourselves that we are all trying to make our best, make sense of everything in our crazy world, and it's not always easy to do that. But here's a reminder from both me and BetterHelp to send some thanks to people in your life right now, including yourself. Therapy can be actually helpful for everyone. That's why you should check out BetterHelp right now. You can learn positive coping skills, how to set better boundaries, and they also empower you to be the best version of yourself at BetterHelp. If you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try right now. It's entirely online, and BetterHelp is designed to be convenient and flexible. It's suited to your schedule, which is huge if you're someone like me who has lots of commitments and not a lot of free time. That's very helpful to be able to mold your schedule around BetterHelp. And all you have to do is fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist. You can also switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Let the gratitude flow with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA to get 10% off your first month with BetterHelp. One more time, the place to go is BetterHelp. That's BetterHelp. BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA. All right, we'll go back to the beginning of this game, and it was a long time ago, it feels like, at this point in time, as I'm recording this podcast late on Sunday, but here we are. The Hawks led 11-2 at the start of this game. Portland called timeout really fast. Reese Shea, who did not play at all really down the stretch of this game, played very well early on. Had a couple nice flash plays defensively. Had a run-out dunk. Good drive to the right side to get to the free throw line through his fellow rookie and Donovan Clingan, etc. And the Hawks led 25-9 in this game. They had 11 points in like a minute and a half in the first quarter. They had 13 fast break points at the outset. It's hard to score 25 points in a 7-minute stretch when you only have 2 threes, but the Hawks were able to do that based on their turnover creation defensively, getting downhill, et cetera, et cetera. Obviously, from that point forward, they lost the game considerably, but they kind of just were probably due for some cooling off. Portland had a nice late run in the first quarter against a bench-shaped lineup to cut the lead in half. Notably, rotation-wise here, Vit Krejci came back in this game. Normally, I would have maybe led with that or come up with that a little bit earlier in the show, but because so much went on here. But welcome back to Vit. Vit missed 9 games. He last played October 28th. Played well in this game. Let's talk about later on. But he returned and was basically, firmly in rotation in this game. Kobe Buffkin was actually upgraded to doubtful over the weekend. Did not play, but he's obviously getting closer and closer. Could play as soon as Monday, so we'll see on that. I'm not sure if he's going to, but he could. And TBD on that. Also of note here, DeAndre Hunter missed this game with knee management on the first night of a back-to-back. I reported this, I think, first maybe on Saturday on social media, and I was told by a team source that it's not a setback or anything weird with the knee. I was told that he felt good after Friday's game. Obviously, that could be spin. I will certainly admit that. But assuming he plays on Monday, it would be very normal to have him not play both ends of a back-to-back as he eases back in. So people were panicking about this. He's already hurt again. Look, if he doesn't play Monday, feel free to panic. Or not panic, or at least have a result. have a negative reaction, etc. But I would have guessed, even before the injury report came out and before I was told anything, that it was unlikely Hunter would play both ends of a back-to-back. Now, how the Hawks decide who plays in what game, I don't always agree with what they do there. But if you said, all right, Hunter's going to play one of these 2 games, he plays one tomorrow, we'll see. If not, TBD on that. And obviously, no Bogey still, no Lundy, no Zeller, and then Mo Gay and Don Barlow were in College Park still on Sunday. So they actually only had not very many bodies available. In fact, everyone that was active for the Hawks in this game, I believe, played. So there you go. To the rest of the actual rotation in the game, Larry Nance was the backup 4 with Hunter out. No surprise there. Okongwu, Garrison Matthews. They actually seem to match Capella and Donovan Clingan pretty intentionally together, which I'm generally in favor of. I probably could have played Capella a little bit more in this game than he actually did, but nothing crazy. Vit played alongside Keaton Wallace a couple times. I think very obviously Vit was on a minutes restriction of some kind. The Hawks would never say what the number was, but they kind of toggled him and Keaton down the stretch. He played 21 minutes. That was a totally fine number for him coming back. And there's always been some uncertainty about how much Vit's going to play when everyone's healthy, but at the moment, he obviously was very much needed in this game for his passing, for his defense, et cetera, et cetera. In fact, they had 2 passes right away. They were led to assists. Nice to have that back on the second unit. The Hawks were up by 12 at the end of the first quarter, and the turnovers did not stop in the first quarter, in the second quarter as well. Like, it was a problem the whole game. Even when they were winning, it was a problem. They had 11 in the first 16 minutes. It kept going. Delano Banton, I think, is officially ascending to Hawks killer status. There are longtime diehards that I can name on the podcast, fans who I've known for a long time and track this stuff. Jason Walker, Florian Peachtree Hoops is one of those, Josh Lane, et cetera. They have kind of like lists in their minds of like Hawks killers on like random players on other teams. Delano Banton might be one of those guys. Banton had his career high last year against the Hawks with 31 points out of nowhere. And tonight he had 13 points in his first nine minutes. Ended this game, I believe, with 23 points in 25 minutes. And he's not like a huge high-scoring guy. So he might be on the Hawks killer list moving forward. And Portland had a nice run late in the first half to get it down to 2. But in contrast to Friday and in the first quarter tonight, the Hawks actually closed the first half pretty well. And they're up by 8 at halftime as a result. Now, it is pretty crazy in a vacuum. And by the way, this is in my notes even before I knew the Hawks were going to blow this lead. To be up by 8 points on the road at halftime, when you turn the ball over 16 times in a half, is like hard to do. 13 turnovers in the first half from Jalen, Trey, and Dyson. I thought Jalen was particularly loose with the ball in this game. He actually led the team in turnovers. He had a rough one, in my opinion. But defensively, they were pretty solid in this one. And the third quarter is what's about to come. I'll be brief on this for sanity purposes for everybody. But the first 7 minutes of the second half were not that much of a disaster. Like, Portland started the half well, got down to 3. The Hawks had an 8-0 run in the middle of the third quarter, and that they're up by 10 again. And I get that stat earlier. It was 76-66 with 7 minutes to go or so in the third quarter. Then it was a 25-2 run by Portland for their first lead in the game, because it was 25-9 Hawks to begin this game. Atlanta did not score for almost 5 full minutes. It was a 17-0 run within that 25-2 overall push. They had turnovers, they had missed shots, and again, bad offense makes life difficult for your defense, especially when you're turning the ball over that many times. Like, missed shots are missed shots. Like, it's not great, but usually they don't lead to huge runouts. Occasionally they do, but turnovers are much more likely to lead to transition and opportunities to lay the ball in with no resistance, and that happened a lot. They lost the last 7 minutes of the quarter by 23 points. They were up 10 and then went it down by 13. Again, they were minus 23 in 7 minutes. That's the game right there. I mean, I don't want to boil it down too much, but that really is where the Hawks lost this game. And I will stand on that. And yes, we will get to the fourth quarter in a second. But the third quarter is where they lost this game, and particularly a minus 23 in 7 minutes. You cannot do that against any opponent, and it happened at a bad time in this one. They ended up shooting 1 of 7 from 3 in the third quarter, and I think my friend Glenn Willis shared this shooting chart on Twitter. But I will also say this: they lost the process battle in the third quarter, and I'm big on that. Like, you want to win on the margins, take care of the ball, rebound, get to the line. Like, it's important to do that because shooting is going to be variance sometimes. Even good shooting teams have bad shooting nights, and vice versa. There's always variance in shooting, but there's less of that in the other categories, which is why you want to win the other categories just to balance it out a little bit. And the Hawks got killed in process in the third quarter And then on top of that, Portland shot well and Atlanta did not. The Blazers were 6 of 8 from 3 in the third quarter to make it even worse. So what I'm not saying is the Hawks played well, because they did not. But even to make it worse, they were punished. So credit to Portland for this. They made their shots. But it was a full-fledged disaster in the third quarter. And again, it was mostly that 7-minute period at the end of the third. Okay. Before we get to the fourth quarter, and there's a lot to get to there, plus some of the player-by-player evaluations in this game, a quick word now from our partners on the podcast. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, and we are now in the NFL season as well, and NBA season, and the action is always nonstop at FanDuel. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook, and right now, if you're a new customer, you get about $5. You get $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. FanDuel Sportsbook app is really easy to use as well. It gives you everything that you actually need to place your bets all in one place, and they have all the stuff you're looking for across the sports betting space, from over-unders to point spreads, money lines, player props, game props, future bets, same-game parlays, live betting, and so much more. The FanDuel app is safe. It's secure. They cover the entire range of sports as well. That includes the NBA, which we talk about all the time on the podcast, plus the NFL, college football, MLB, hockey, WNBA, golf, tennis, soccer, and all kinds of soccer leagues, honestly. F1, NASCAR, MMA, boxing, and so much more. And now is an awesome time to sign up with the folks at FanDuel Sportsbook. And the place to go is FanDuel.com to get started with $150 in bonus bets when you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com, $150 in bonus bets when you win your first $5 bet at FanDuel Sportsbook. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, and we'll dive into the fourth quarter now. And honestly, a lot of it was good. Not all of it, but a lot of it. They won the quarter by 9 points in a vacuum. V had a nice catch and shoot three at the outset of the fourth quarter that was like very much needed. Even in my notes in real time, it was like, all right, they had to have that go in, and went in. It was kind of a dust up at the 9-minute mark, some light shoving, some trash talk, nothing big, kind of a delay there. The Hawks were down by 9 at that point in time. And when you're down by that much, the goal really becomes to chip away some more at the margin to make it manageable. And they did that very nicely, in fact. They held Portland scoreless for almost 5.5, 6 minutes in the fourth quarter, and they tied it with a 13-0 run. They got 9 consecutive defensive stops, and they played a defense first mostly lineup, other than a little bit small. It was a Congo the entire time down the stretch, which I think was okay. I might have used Capella a little bit down the stretch of the game, but I thought it wasn't like egregious at all. And then they basically went with either Vit Krejci or Keaton Wallace alongside Trey, Dyson, and Jalen. I would have gone to Ricochet. And I said that in real time. I still believe that now. Now, what you're doing there with Keaton and with Vit is giving you a little bit more ball handling, in theory, more of a guard. But I thought Zach was good in this game, other than he didn't shoot the ball away from 3, as he hasn't most of the season. But he was okay. 2 turnovers, but like defensively, he was good. I would have used him more, I thought, in the fourth quarter. But anyway, also did not have a turnover in the whole stretch. So I said it before, they only had 3 giveaways in the fourth quarter. None of them were in the first 8 minutes of the fourth quarter. So like they had a really, really, really good 8-minute period to not erase the disaster of the third quarter, but to neutralize it some, to go from basically being down 13 to in a tie or tight game from that point forward. Jalen turned it over, was the first one. He threw it away. They got the ball back. Quinn had a nice challenge to get the ball back in the middle with like 4 minutes to go. They took their first lead of the fourth quarter on a 3 by Trey. They had some chances to stretch the lead out. Dyson missed a floater. Kong missed a floater in the lane. They got some stops. I'll fast forward a little bit here. They exchanged buckets to keep the Hawks up by 3 points with like 1:50 to go. They allowed a second chance bucket with about that point in time. They got a little bit unlucky on that play. There was a jumper by Portland that missed so badly they actually didn't hit the rim, and that led to a kind of a carom to the Blazers. But that was one of, I think, 3 bad defensive rebounding moments in the fourth quarter. That was one of them. But you're up by 1. They call a foul on Portland on a bit of a weird play with Trey initiating contact, but in a smart way. It was called a foul on the floor, and it would not have been free throws. It would have been the 4th foul for Portland, no bonus, etc. Side out for the Hawks. Chauncey Billups, the Blazers head coach, challenged it, and it was a disaster for them because it would have been the Hawks inbounding the ball, and instead it was overturned to a 3-shot foul after review. So it could have been no shots, ended up being 3 shots. Unfortunately, Trey only made 2 of 3, which isn't like a disaster, but that is a point that was a big one at the end. But with that said, they're up 3 with 1.5 minutes to go. They foul Shaedon Sharpe. He misses the first. Sorry, he makes the first, misses the second. But then again, second straight time, they get the loose ball, and they ended up with a 3 by Sharpe at the shot clock buzzer. And that was I would say about a 30-footer. Just an awesome shot, contested, like shot of the game shot from Portland. Some negative variance there, but it happens in the NBA. It's why you can't give away this huge lead that you had. They failed to score on the next possession. Dyson misses a pretty good look at a floater. They get the ball back when it went out of bounds, but then Dyson throws the ball away. So Dyson's been awesome this year. He had a kind of a rough stretch run offensively in this game. They had to foul. They called. They didn't have to foul, I should say. They foul Sharp. He makes both. So suddenly the Hawks are down by 3 after they had a chance to go up by 4 with a minute and a half to go. Instead, they're up by 3, and suddenly they're down by 1 after a 4-point possession. In about 30 seconds, they go from potentially being up by 4 to being down by 1. Big swing. Then Sharp makes both. You're down 3. Hawks call timeout. They advance the ball and get an open layup for Trey with 15 seconds to go. Nice pass by Okongwu. It's down to 1. This time they have to foul. Okongwu saves a dunk by fouling Sharp in transition. They put in Capella along with Okongwu to get the rebound, which was smart to do. They get the rebound, and Sharp misses the second one. So now they have the ball back with 10 seconds to go, down by 2. So everything to get there was really the problem. You lost on the margins in the last 3 minutes of time, but you have a chance to tie the game or win the game. They call timeout to advance the ball. Now they threw the ball into the backcourt, and this is not the first time this has actually happened, and it was seemingly on purpose. I don't know if Trey wants to do that or if Quinn wants to do that or both, but I don't like doing that because you don't have that much time. It happened early this season as well. You just kind of have no margin for error. You're throwing the ball in, you advance the ball on a timeout, and then you're throwing the ball backwards. I don't understand why they're doing that. Anyway, I didn't love that, and that makes things harder. But Trey gets bumped a little bit, going to his right. He seemingly thought that Dyson was going to go backdoor. Dyson kind of jab steps toward that way, but then stops. Ball's thrown away. Turnover. I have not heard if anybody said anything about this play, miscommunication or whatever. It was ugly. And by the way, not a good play by Trey, obviously. It was fitting of the night, I would say. The Hawks committed a turnover on their last possession because that was the problem of the entire evening for Atlanta. But just because I saw this narrative late in the game, Trey had 14 points on 8 shots in the fourth quarter. He was really good. It wasn't like he collapsed in this game, but it was definitely an untimely bad moment from the best player who gets the heat because that's what happens with the best player. It makes sense. But that one play does not erase everything else. I understand it's always going to come down to that, and because it becomes the coach is terrible and the players are terrible or whatever. I get it. I'm going to give you more nuance than that on this podcast, and I'll say it one more time, like I did earlier, that while the fourth quarter gets all the heat, the game was lost in the third. That's not even up for debate for me. It's not even close. And yeah, leverage plays, whatever. You got to make the plays at the end of the game. Portland made their big shot. Sharp hit a very, very difficult, probably a 20% shot. He made it. The Hawks did not execute on their end of the floor. And that's, quote unquote, why they lost the game in the fourth quarter. But this game was lost in the third. The Hawks won the fourth quarter by 9 points. They were down by 13 and then took the lead again. So, yes, they didn't execute well late in the game, but that was not why they lost. They lost this game because of the 7-minute stretch to end the third quarter, and that is pretty clear. All right, to the player stuff in this game quickly. The deep bench guys got rocked in this game. And it's not all about them necessarily, but Larry Nance and Garrison Matthews played about 11 minutes each. Nance was minus 18. Garrison was minus 19. They were on the floor for a large part of the third quarter, and that is part of that. They also lost some minutes in the first half. I thought Garrison made a couple threes, notable there, but the defense with Larry and Garrison was rough. They were not the ones turning the ball over, to their credit. 0 combined turnovers for those guys. But I would say all year long so far, Nance's defensive impact has been pretty negative, I would say. And when he's not making every shot on offense, it's been a little bit tough for him. And Garrison is kind of always that story. He made some shots in this game. He made 2 threes. But, nuts and bolts wise, the deep bench was rough. Keaton Wallace played 17 minutes. Keaton had a interesting game. I thought he was pretty bad on offense for most of the game, but he did only have 1 turnover and was kind of a steady hand at times down the stretch. He did have 0 points on 3 shots, did have 3 fouls and 2 assists. I thought Keaton defensively did his job and more. He's always a good defender. I think some of the Keaton offensive experience has been a little bit exposed in the last week plus. It's not super NBA ready right now, but again, to defend him, he isn't supposed to be playing this much. It's not his fault. But I thought it was interesting that he played as much as he did. It didn't work, quote unquote. They were winning the minutes in the fourth quarter. He was plus 11 in this game, but I think it was more of a product of everybody else for the most part. Although it was steady down the stretch, which is notable. Vit played 22 minutes or so, 8 points, 3 assists, 2 rebounds, hit a couple threes. I thought Vit looked good. I think Vit is very helpful. He isn't going to blow anybody away, but he does little things very well. His passing was much missed when he was off the floor in the last 3 weeks or so, 4 weeks or so. The shooting is going to wax and wane a little bit, but I thought he's a very helpful piece, and nice to have him back. Okongwu played 28 minutes off the bench, had 11 points, 11 rebounds, and 3 assists, 2 steals, 2 blocks as well. He was minus 12 in the game. They were plus 8 with Capella, minus 12 with Okongwu. Not because of Okongwu, I don't think. He wasn't great, but I thought he was fine. He gives them more on offense. That's the same story as we've talked about all year long, basically. I thought that he was not the problem, but he was not a huge part of the solution in this game either. Speaking of Capella, 20 minutes, plus 8 points, 8 rebounds, 3 assists actually for Clint in this game. Had a steal and a block. Played fine. Efficiency, I think he had 2 or 3 ugly misses. I think he got blocked maybe twice in this game as well. Offensively, it's not ever going to be perfect for Clint at this stage. He is their best defensive center. That's been clear for most of the season, I think. But I thought he was fine in his minutes. Ricochet, I mentioned before, I thought played pretty well in a limited sample size. Never came back in the fourth quarter. 11 points, 4 rebounds, 2 assists for Ricochet, 2 turnovers, and plus 9 in 21 minutes. Defensively, he really popped. Also made 5 of 5 at the free-throw line in this game, which is not a small thing because he's been really rough at the line so far this year. So him being 5 for 5 there is very helpful. Dyson Daniels still is just wrecking people defensively, and like that, I recommend listening to the podcast from last week. He's been on this incredible run of just havoc creation. His steals actually came down finally in this game. His history-making run ended with only quote unquote only 2 in this game. 12 points, 5 assists, 8 rebounds for Dyson as well. But he was 5 of 17 from the floor, including 4 of 12 on 2s. Now the threes are fine, 1 of 5. That's going to happen sometimes. He was a little bit over his skis offensively in this one, 6 turnovers. I like the aggression, candidly, from Dyson. I'm totally fine with it. He should be aggressive. That's always going to get better and help them grow. It just was not great in this one, which is okay. It's going to happen sometimes. I think he still impacted the game at a high level for the most part. This is going to be an interesting one. Jalen Johnson, 25 points on 16 shots. So he was very efficient as a scorer in this game. Did have 4 assists, 4 rebounds, 2 steals. He had 7 turnovers, which was the most on the team. And I thought Jalen did not play well. Now, that's going to sound funny. If you didn't watch this game, all you might see is 25 points on 16 shots. And that's, again, I led with that on purpose. He was efficient as a scorer. I thought Jalen was pretty bad, honestly, for most of this game. The turnovers were one thing. The defense was really bad, I thought, for Jalen at times in this one. He did have 1 block and 2 steals, but just play-by-play wise, which was not effective. He was not terribly aggressive either, 50-50 balls. He just wasn't dialed in, I didn't think, defensively in this game. And there's some noise there. I think Jalen, this guy is the limit for him as a player. He's had a really good start to the season overall. I think defensively this year, it's been below what I hope it's going to be moving forward for Jalen. That's all year long. And tonight was a little bit worse than that. And then the turnover. So just a little bit odd performance. I don't think he was unplayable, but he was not good in this game, I didn't think, despite the fact that he had 25 points. But I will say this, in his defense, all year long, including tonight, and it's almost every single game, the Hawks are good when he plays, and they are awful when he doesn't play. And part of that is maybe his backups are not great, like Larry Nance at the 4, not great. David Roddy at the 4, not good at all. He didn't play in this game. In fact, he was the only guy that did not play. It was active, I should say that before I forget. But I think Jalen was not particularly good, but even then, they won his minutes, so there you go. And then Trey, interesting game as well. 29 points, 8 assists for Trey. He wasn't super aggressive as a scorer because he was getting blitzed the entire game. They have 6 turnovers. I think defensively he was actually pretty good down the stretch. There were some moments, I think Quinn talks about that post-game as well. It wasn't his best night, but he also was efficient. He was 5-10 from 3, 8 of 16 from the field, 8 of the free throw line, so 29 points on 20 shots. Pretty good there. So, the last play is people are going to remember that, and that's fine. It was not a good moment for him at all. You got to get a shot up there, even if it's a bad shot, you got to get a shot up there. But, I would recommend looking beyond that moment in evaluating Trae Young. All right. That's all I have on this. Again, one last time, a bad loss for the Hawks. Not the worst loss I've ever seen in my life. I think this is actually not even as bad of a loss as either one of the losses to the Wizards earlier in the season. So there are layers to this, as people might say, but it was not a good result. And that third quarter, I'll be thinking about that third quarter all season long. I kind of keep a running tally of some of the worst quarters or worst stretches or worst halves, so I can kind of note that on social media during games when it happens, or best stretches too. I try to keep all that stuff kind of in a notes section. And it was maybe not the worst quarter of the season, but it was up there, certainly in the top 3 in the third. But it was, with a bullet, the worst 7 minutes of the season. And that was what cost them this game and cost them a chance to get to 500 and starting the road trip with the win, all those things. And there you go. I guess on the bright side, the Hawks do only have a few hours to prepare and cleanse the palate before they play a basketball game. So they play on Monday in Sacramento. A tough spot. The Kings won the first matchup against the Hawks on November 1st in Atlanta. That was a competitive game, but one that the Hawks lost, I think, by 8 points by the end of it. Not an impossible matchup at all. The Kings are a decent team, not a great team. They are like a low-end playoff, play-in kind of level team, in my opinion. They're 8-6 this year. They do have a rest advantage in this game because the Hawks played today and the Kings did not, plus the game's at home. And I'll note this. De'Aaron Fox has 109 points in the last 2 games for Sacramento. 60 and then 49 for De'Aaron Fox. Obviously, he gets to face Dyson Daniels, at least on paper, in that game. But that's a matchup to watch, to be sure. He's been out of his mind in recent days. Also, their injury report is out. DeMar DeRozan and Malik Monk are out for the Kings on Monday. And Domantas Sabonis is doubtful. So if he doesn't play, it becomes a much more manageable spot for Atlanta. You never want to root for guys to not play. But the reality is, if they don't have Sabonis, DeRozan, and Monk, it's an easier matchup. But now still, I will say that the injury report's been out for a few hours. Our friends at FanDuel still have the Hawks as a 5-point underdog because they understand that a back-to-back with travel after this loss is tough, especially when the Kings are at full strength. Well, not full strength, but at full rest and not traveling. So a lot of moving parts there. We'll get into that game. Of course, when it's over on Monday, it's a late start. This was a little bit lucky for East Coast fans like they're listening to the podcast or someone like me covering the game from the East Coast. It was an earlier start, afternoon game in Portland. It's a 10 o'clock start on Monday. So it'll be a late night podcast. It will not be posted until Tuesday morning, but there will be a breakdown in the same podcast feed that listen to right now. Speaking of which, please subscribe to the podcast anywhere you get your podcast. If you made it this far, first of all, thank you for listening to the podcast, but also please smash the subscribe button on Apple, on Spotify, and Overcast. Like the video on YouTube, subscribe on YouTube as well, and please tell your friends about the podcast. Also, you can follow the show on Twitter/X at Locked On Hawks. I am on there at BT Rowland. I'm also on Blue Sky at BT Rowland. And please follow my non-podcast work at patreon.com/BT Rowland. All right, that's all I have at the end of this weekend, heading into Monday morning. Thanks for listening, everybody. I definitely appreciate it. We'll be back in about 24, 26, 27 hours, something like that. And we'll see you all next time.